Hello there, this is Dr. Jimmy again. And first I'd like to say Happy Mother's Day to anybody out there who's some sort of mother. Or mother, well, let's not go there. Anyway, this is my 11th video in my series on the history of Halloween Horror Nights 21. And of course, as usual, I shall start with the t-shirt that I'm wearing today. And this time, kiddies, this time indeed, the shirt is, in fact, a clue for one of the houses coming up for Halloween Horror Nights 26. Oh my God, really? You're actually going to give us a clue for once? Yes. Ooh, that's right, kids. There will be an Exorcist house this year. Yes. Oh, you already knew that? Oh well, sorry. Anyway, yes, I got this shirt actually to commemorate the upcoming house. I really like it. It's got a Captain Howdy in the image, but also, if you notice, superimposed Pazuzu himself. Oh yes, I like Pazuzu. You know, I am a professor of religion, and I could go on quite a bit about Pazuzu. I could fill a whole video all about him alone. Maybe I will do one of those, but not now. That would take too long, and we wouldn't have time to talk about Halloween Horror Nights 21, which is what this video is meant to be. I go off on too many asides way too often. And of course, my previous video, I had wrapped up The Forsaken, and had started in on The In-Between, which was the 6th house that year. But I now realise there's one little tidbit about Souls in Steam that I forgot to mention earlier when I did all those videos yesterday. Souls in Steam Into the Machine, of course, was in the Jaws overflow queue area, and the moment we discovered that house was going into Jaws, people began referring to the house as Jaws and Steam. It just became a sort of obvious joke, and so throughout the entire event we said, let's go to Jaws and Steam, you know, deciding which house to do, so we would call it that. In fact, one fellow made a t-shirt with a steampunk shark, and it said Jaws and Steam. Clever t-shirt. I got one, and occasionally I might be wearing it, but not today. So that was the last little bit about that house. Let's get back to the in-between. Now, I set up pretty much the backstory and talked about inspirations and all that. So let's just get on to the house. As I said, it was in sprung tent number 1. That's the same sprung tent that was the Purge house last year, for those of you keeping track. And so when you went into that house, and thus the queue area would have been, of course, over in Kid Zone. Yes. When you went into the in-between, it was, first, the facade was this magnificent comic book. The comic book cover of the In-Between, published by Ultraviolet Comics, which I talked about before. So you actually go into the comic book cover. And then, of course, you put on your nifty little 3D glasses, because this was a 3D house. Oh my, one of the better 3D houses they've ever done. It wasn't 3D for corniness or comedy. It was 3D for horror, which is unique. They don't do that very often. There's usually a bit of funniness going on, more fun house elements in a 3D house, but this one did not. This one used 3D for another effect altogether. A dimension of insanity, another dimension altogether, thus 3D, 3 dimensions. You're going into a 4th dimension, or a 5th one, or a 95th one, who knows. They say there's 11 dimensions, if you know your M theory, but that's for the nerds out there. Alright, so the in-between, and the first thing you go when you go into the in-between is a college dormitory room. There's some college boys, and thus the room's a filthy mess, and there's dirty socks lying around, and pizza boxes, you know, with half-eaten bits of pizza in it, and empty beer cans. I don't know if there was a bong lying around in the room, and there should have been, but because that's something you find in college boys' rooms often. And of course, on a table is the mysterious board, not a classical Ouija board, but something more arcane and sinister, going back to ancient civilizations and used to conjure dark spirits. And the study boys stole that from the professor and were messing about with it, and they opened a portal into another dimension. And so immediately you get into that other dimension and you find yourself in the vortex tunnel. Oh, the lovely vortex tunnel, further complicated by 3D, and so you find yourself shifting to one side or the other as you see these images of demonic faces going round and round and weird esoteric symbols, and then you're in the other dimension and it's all dark and there's glowing things on the walls and on the floor and on the ceiling all about you, and they seem to be right up closer than they really are, especially weird pentacle-like symbols with strange esoteric writings and designs, sort of thing that you see in old grimoires, like, you know, the Greater Key of Solomon or the Book of Abramelin the Mage, or any of those other great old ancient books, which if you want to, or even not real books that allegedly exist, perhaps maybe not, like a Necronomicon or the Darkhold, if you know your Marvel comics, all that sort of stuff. And you're going into and some of it, and one really funny, because one of the symbols had a triangle in a circle with a line through it. Isn't that the Deadly Hallows from Harry Potter? That's a silly thing to put into the mace, but it was there anyway, just as a bit of an inside joke, I suppose, about what was coming eventually and what was at that time still Amity Village. But going through there, and they had all sorts of nifty special effects. At one point, of course, the neat transparent wall where a demon is floating on the other side of the wall, just like they did in Legendary Truth a year before, an effect they continue to use at different times at the event. And of course then you go into more dark rooms where the demons themselves appear, and they have horrible bat-like heads and great wings or cloaks, hard to tell which, but they're dark on the outside. When they open them up, they're all bright, and you can see all the bright 3D, so the demons appear to be closer to you than they really are. And of course, you know, it makes you jump back, and they are popping up all over the place, scary, coming out of boo-hoos, stepping out of the dark, attacking you. Very effective. It's a short house, not much more than that, just demons through the end of it. And as you go through, and you know what happened to those boys, who are likely their souls are lost forever in that other realm, that in between the realms and dimensions, wherever they are, caught forever. But very effective, and one of the best uses of 3D. So this house, along with the Forsaken, both very artistic and very lovely, they got the House of the Year, a tie that year between the two houses, and I think it was deserved. All right. Now, of course, just like in previous, that year, of course, was the year I started the whole cocktail thing, and so I had to come up with a cocktail for the in-between. Let's see, that's not what I meant to do. Let's see if I can find, oh, here we are. And albums, and here we are, cocktails for 21. All right, so here it is, and I describe that cocktail on my Facebook as For the In-Between, this trippy cocktail inspired by On Acid drinks and the frat boy favorite Purple Jesus. Raspberry vodka, blue curacao, grenadine with a twist of lemon, of course. It came out looking rather purple. And here it is. That was in a martini glass served straight up. This was the in-between cocktail made at Finnegan's Bar and Grill. Very nice. All right. So, done already with the in-between. Let's go on with the final house of the event. And this was located in Sprung Tent 2. And if you're keeping track, that's the location last year of Insidious, and will most likely be the location this year, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We know that because Mike Aiello said it would be in a Sprung Tent, and he also said that another house would be in Sprung Tent 1, the house that we know very little about. It's an original house. We know the code word is cobweb. We've seen some construction pictures, but it could be damn near anything because it's an original. And it's not the requel, so it's not going to be the reboot, sequel, remake of a former haunted house that was an original in years past. So whatever it is, it's an original. Could be almost anything at all. And so it remains one of those mysteries that we anticipate eagerly. Oh, the suspense, oh, the speculation. Everyone starts speculating, what is Cobweb? So one silly person, well, not that silly, but thought that Mike Aiello was making a lie and it's actually going to be the IP The Conjuring, but I don't think that's true at all. He wouldn't say it was an original if it wasn't an original. So it's not The Conjuring. I don't think that's even going to be at the event this year, but we'll see. So, in that location then is where they had the house Nevermore, the Madness of Poe. So you had to enter over by Men in Black, of course, in the queue. And so you go into the house. Of course, Edgar Allan Poe, have to talk about him. Edgar Allan Poe, of course, one of the great figures of American literature, also writing in the early 19th century, the Romantic era. And Poe had a rather tragic life. His own parents either abandoned him, and he was raised by some of his relatives. He took their name Poe. I think he was originally born Edgar Allan. I'm not entirely certain. Maybe it was Edgar Poe and he added Allan. I'm not entirely certain. I have to go look it up. But I know he changed his name after he was sort of adopted by his other relatives. And he's raised mainly by his aunt, whom he adored, his aunt. He also really loved her daughter, his first cousin. I mean, he really loved her, even though she was his cousin, and even though she was only 14 years old when they married. So he married his cousin, and she was, 14 years old. Nowadays, oh my God, they would have said pedophile and locked him up or something. But at that time, it was perfectly legal, and so it wasn't a crime at all. And in fact, more recently, there was a rock and roll fellow, I think it was Jerry Lee Lewis, married his 14-year-old girl cousin. So it's not something that's that unusual, even today in certain states where laws are a bit more loose about inbreeding and, and incest, I suppose, and what the age of consent might be. There you go. Standards are different in different places and different times. But today, Poe, of course, would have been lambasted for that sort of thing. Anyway, but he did tend to do this a lot. He was a bit of a drunk, really, if you to be accurate. Brilliant genius. Most of his writing never really got published or in his life. Some of it he self-published, the Tales of Mystery and Imagination, and most of the work got published in a newspaper that he actually worked for. So he was able to get his work in that newspaper, including famously, "Stop making noise, you phone. I'm trying to talk here." Naughty phone. Somebody tweeted something. I don't know what it is. I'll check it later. But again, he was a sad fellow. His poem, The Raven, was probably the most famous thing in his lifetime. But later on, the French really started picking up his works and liked them a lot. And eventually, he became renowned as a great poet and writer of American literature after he had been dead for quite some time. So he didn't get the recognition he deserved in his life, and that made him rather sad. Also sad, that little girl cousin of his that he married, she died young. I think it was tuberculosis or something, and that made him even more sad. And so you find a lot of his stuff is about, mourning over someone that he'd lost. The Raven, lost Lenore, will I ever see her again somewhere, someplace? And the bird says, "Hell no, bitch!" Well, that's not what the bird said. The bird said nevermore, but, well, it was rapping at the door, so maybe it was a bit of a rapper. Cadences of Poe's poetry, "Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, here come a bird, he said the word, nevermore, rapping at my door." Sorry, that was stupid. But, it was a blackbird, so that's even racist. Sorry about that, didn't mean it. All right, getting on to it. So he went a bit balmy at times. Sometimes he'd go into deep melancholia and insanity, and he even wrote about that he is quite sane he's insane with terrible moments of horrible sanity. Well, that's from fiction, of course. He was writing but many of his first-person stories are people who have serious problems mentally. Don't say that I'm mad. I'm not mad. Would a madman do this? Cut up a person, take their heart, and no, bury them under the floorboards? I was so clever. Oh, the damn police found it. The heart kept beating, kept beating. They couldn't hear it, but I could. That sort of thing, you know. A bit balmy. So he went a bit mad, you see, at times. He didn't actually do any of those evil things. He got that out by writing about nasty things. But then he died rather bizarrely and suspiciously. He went out on a bender. He was going to go to New York on the train, but instead ended up in Baltimore. Why? He's in Baltimore, and they find him there on the park bench in the middle of Baltimore, out of his mind. He'd been drunk. He's wearing someone else's clothes. What happened to his clothes? Why is he wearing someone else's clothes? And he's saying over and over again, Reynolds. Who the hell was Reynolds? We never found out. He died, and that was a terrible loss. Died young, and thus tragic. Good career move, dying young, though. You never get old and ugly like and you end up being pretty for the rest of your life. So this house then delves into his psyche, and in the strange twisted writings, and is he quite balmy, what is his madness? And you go into the mind of Poe and see all the weird haunted things in his fiction, and you actually enter his fiction itself, because the facade has this great picture of Poe, but as you get closer you see that the picture is actually made of his words and his writings. It's all very clever, and you go in and there's pages flying around you and of his work and his writing desk and all kinds of creepy artifacts that he might have had in his study when he was writing. And then you start going into the stories and poems. The raven, represented by a dark corridor with horrible gigantic bird men peeking, coming out of the alcoves, their beaks stabbing towards you, the ravens, and all of that. The pit in the pendulum, you're in a dark dungeon, there's dead people and skeletons being tortured. Of course, the poor bastard on the table with the big blade sliding, cutting them in half, and some of the bodies are quite alive. They come out of the boo hole at you, that sort of thing. Then you go into the Telltale Heart. Now that's a terrifying room. It's all bizarre because, you know, the story, the guy killed the old man who had the vulture eye that terrified him, and he buries them on the floorboards, but the heart keeps beating and drives him crazy if he wasn't fucking insane already. And so you see the guy huddled over the floor, and of course all of these people look just like Edgar Allan Poe, and he's over the floor, and he has the open floorboards, and the heart is beating inside, but you see that on the floor, but you also see it on the wall and on the ceiling. It's all around you. They recreated the same diorama all over the entire room, so it's like, oh my god, it's like you're in a weird sort of psychological insanity where it's all around you. And then, of course, out of the boo hole, when you least expect it, comes that horrible old man with the vulture eye, to terrify you as you go into another room, which is all paintings of all the lost loves, all these beautiful women. And, of course, Ligeia perhaps comes out of the staircase to come after you. Or is it Lenore, or is it any of the other women that are in these sort of stories, from maybe the House of Usher, maybe Ligeia, maybe one of the others, who knows. Berenice, I wouldn't check to see if she had her teeth or not. But then you go into, I think it's the Black Cat is next, and so you go down a corridor, and there is Poe. He's bricking himself up. In the course in the Black Cat, he bricked his wife's corpse up, and of course he accidentally had the cat in there too. Big mistake. She's bricking up. You see the wife back behind the bricks as well in another scene. And then in the background there's the cat itself sitting there. Big black cat looking evil, only one eye. Yes. And then also the cask of Amontillado is referenced here because of the bricking up. And the Mask of the Red Death, of course. And this is the irony, of course, because I had, of course, made my April Fool's gag about the Poe house, which I have put in the parade building, was all going to be Mask of the Red Death. Well, they did a Poe house actually. So again, I made a joke that turned out to be sort of true, but there was a Mask of the Red Death scene, and you're in this chamber, and all around you there are mirrors, and you have the dancers dancing and twirling, and others in the alcoves with their masks on. The Red Death himself, overall in his long red cloaks and his desiccated face. And one of them, one of the dancers is an ape, which might refer to God knows, Hop Frog maybe, or perhaps to premature. No, what's the one with the murders to Rue Morgan? There was an ape in some of his works, and so it's all rather creepy and nasty as you go through all these twisty corridors of the Red Death. And then you have everything at once, all these different characters and the ravens again, and all the pages as you go through the vortex of pages and ravens and madness, and as you exit the house. So it's a very clever, well done house, which evoked all the works of Edgar Allan Poe lovingly. And again, of course, cocktail was necessary. Cocktail for that house. The cocktail was, as I said, for Nevermore, the Madness of Poe, a variation on drinks. Poe was, hang on, there I am. Poe was known to like, only a bit more decadent. So it was whiskey, sweet vermouth, and Grand Marnier to make it a bit more decadent. All right, and here's the image of the drink, which was served in a rocks glass with a bit of lemon, I think, as a, oh no, I think that's a slice of orange as the garnish on ice, of course. So there it is. That was the drink for Nevermore, because he liked to drink whiskey and vermouth and that sort of thing. But I added the Grand Marnier to make it a bit more decadent. So there we go. That was, we've covered all the haunted houses. So when I start part 12, I shall begin with the scare zones of Halloween Horror Nights 21.